Welcome to the Exponential Minds podcast. The research, development, launch, and growth of new technologies is creating incredible momentum in the modern world. Join Futurist Nikolas Badminton as he talks with the innovators and the exponential minds that are tackling some of the biggest problems and creating solutions that are propelling humanity to the next level.
Hello and welcome to the Exponential Minds podcast. My name's Nikolas Badminton. I'm a futurist. I help my clients look out 5, 10, 20 plus years into the future so they can start designing more resilient and better strategic planning and envision those risks that are difficult to see by applying strategic foresight. And today on the podcast, I'm incredibly excited to chat to my friend Oksana Andreiuk. Oksana is a biotechnology scientist, biohacker, and a futurist. She founded Canadian Biohacker with a mission of bringing health optimization and anti-aging science to the mainstream. She's also a strategist at Klick Health, one of the top marketing and commercialization agency partners to global life sciences organizations. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Genetics and Biology and a Master of Biotechnology from the University of Toronto. Oksana has a long-standing interest in the applications of biotechnology to optimize health and performance, and she believes the future of healthcare lies in disease prevention, as well as delaying and maybe even reversing the aging process, ultimately extending health span and lifespan. And Oksana, I'm excited to talk to you today about something close to my heart, biohacking, and about your journey of how you got to this stage in your life and this focus.
Thanks so much for having me, Nick, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm so excited to be on the podcast today.
Yeah, and Oksana, we always start with our guests like telling us a little bit about their story. Where did you start with your biohacking journey, and where are you with it today?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. It's I think it's been a long time in the making. I've always been a sci-fi nerd growing up, and so I've always been interested in technology and technology innovation. And with a background in genetics and biotech, again, I've always been interested in sort of the applications of biotech to optimize our health, our performance, but with a special interest in longevity because, and maybe we'll talk about this later, but many people biohack for different reasons. And my reason is to live healthier for longer. And a few years ago, I came across the whole field of longevity science research, and my mind was blown by all the incredible research that was happening in the space that was primarily privately funded up until a couple of years ago when the World Health Organization updated the International Code of Diseases for the first time since 1983 to add aging related as a code, which really opened the doors to public funding and accelerated the field even further. And today, longevity is projected to reach 27 trillion by 2025. So, I mean, this is a very real space, and we can very much expect to see longevity therapeutics approved on the market for, human consumption and use within our lifetime. And so knowing that, I started thinking, well, what can I do today to keep myself in that peak primal optimal state to take full advantage when those longevity therapeutics do come in the market that will promise to slow down or even reverse the aging process. And so that got me interested in biohacking, and I discovered that, there were so many biohacking events and even conferences happening all over the world. And so that led me to start the Biohacking and Longevity TO meetup group in Toronto, which quickly became Toronto's first and largest biohacking meetup group event. And we've really seen interest grow in biohacking because I think there is an increased interest in disease prevention and optimizing our health right now. I think especially with the last year and the pandemic as well. So that's what really excites me. But, there's the fundamental aspects of biohacking, which is, how you're sleeping, how you're eating, the nutrition, your mental health. But having a biotechnology background, I'm also very much interested in the applications of technology to continue to optimize us beyond, potentially even human limits. So that's what I really nerd out on. And I think my first sort of biohacking experiment for myself was getting rid of my insomnia, which I've experienced since high school. It runs in my family. And I think a struggle for many. And I was in that vicious cycle of, guzzling coffee and sleeping 5 to 6 hours a day. And our bodies are very adaptive, right? And so you may think you're operating at a good state, but you don't know how much better you can feel if you're getting that proper quality sleep. So that was my first biohacking experiment. I completely got rid of my insomnia, which was amazing, and really optimized my deep sleep and REM sleep scores. And that, of course, led me to further explorations in biohacking after that.
That's really fascinating, and I know you've spoken at Diet Futures before, and you spoke about similar technologies, and you also, if you follow Oksana on Instagram and in social, you sort of see some of these experiments you share what you're doing and how things are operating, and it's interesting to me. I mean, you mentioned the longevity therapeutics market is going to be $27 trillion.
That's what they're projecting. Yeah.
For which year there, Oksana?
2025.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So that's huge, considering if you look at the global economy, like as a whole, it's probably about $110 trillion. That's a significant piece of the pie, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think many people don't realize just how massive and rapidly accelerating this industry is. I mean, there are over 130 longevity biotechnology companies right now. There are over 50 anti-aging drugs in clinical trials. There's an increasing number of longevity-focused VC funds as well. Not only venture capital funds that invest in longevity biotech as part of their overall portfolio, but specifically focus on only investing in longevity-focused companies, which is incredible.
That's absolutely incredible. I mean, this is the old adage of like everyone wants to live forever, and it's very much been fetishized down in Silicon Valley in a way. I mean, I got into biohacking back in the day, and it was more about people that I knew in the community. They were microdosing LSD and mescaline and psilocybin. They were looking at that side of things, and for me, I've sort of moved into sort of a psychological sort of approach of healing the inner child, doing breath work and doing some of that epigenetic stuff. But this is fascinating to me. I haven't really spent a lot of time looking at this market, and I've got terrible insomnia as well. So I'd like to deal with some of this, and I should know better on a lot of behaviors like technology in the bedroom and whatever. But I really want to understand, on a daily basis, what do you do, and how did you make the decision to do that, to maintain this sort of optimal life?
Oh, we could spend a whole podcast talking about that.
Well,
I feel like, but I'll give. I mean, you know what? It started, as I said, with tackling the insomnia, which included a lot of sleep hygiene practices, and of course, technology to help track the results as well. There's so much tech to help with relaxation and stress management, and sort of things you can optimize in your environment, in the bedroom, air quality, temperature, things like that. So there are various steps you can take, but just on a daily basis, I mean, you have to take care of the foundations, like optimizing your sleep, which is number one. And there's a great book by Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep, which I always recommend to everyone, because there are a lot of, I think, misconceptions around the importance of sleep, and it literally affects all our physiological processes.
Right.
And the mental to living a longer life. But aside from that, how you're exercising and moving, getting that movement throughout the day. There are different forms of exercise, but for example, high intensive interval training has been shown to provide the best ROI for sort of time and energy spent versus the results that you see on a physiological level. And then otherwise, stress management, meditation, deep breathing, as you mentioned, cold showers. Listening to binaural beats is great as well for sort of calming down the nervous system. So you start to look at those 5 fundamental pillars and start to optimize going from there. So sleep, nutrition, exercise, mental health, and your environment. And there are a lot of things that you can do naturally. And I talk about this as well, just, the free biohacks that anyone can do. But aside from that, we now have so much technology that can help us do that and help us bring that to the next level. And that's what really jazzes me up, having a biotech background. And I love checking out new gadgets and seeing how they work. There's a lot of exciting tech that's coming on the market. And as you mentioned, neuroscience as well. This is a huge growing space, neurotech, and I find it really exciting.
So yeah, let's get into that neurotech, because it seems like there's tons of people out there. They've got an app for this, an app for that. Obviously, Calm is a huge app, right? Mm-hmm. And then you've got Headspace, and you've got all of these things, and they were sort of in the shadows, I think, about 5 years ago, and they're sort of very front and center. And you even got Headspace on airplanes now. Mm-hmm. I think it's part of normal programming, and so it's starting to sort of seep into to being used. But I mean, what's the most exciting sort of technology that you think is being developed right now, and how do you think that's going to sort of develop over time?
So it's looking into neurospace. There are so many gadgets that are coming on the market, and they tend to target different things sometimes. But there are a couple of tech that can help create that baseline for how your brain is functioning right now. So a couple of years ago, I did have my brain scanned at the Peak Brain Institute in LA. Right. And that was fascinating. And I wrote a detailed blog post about that and the results and how the whole process went and what I learned about my brain and how it functions. There's also Brain Gauge, that is a direct-to-consumer product that anyone can buy if you don't have access to a clinic, that will give you a score as well on your cognitive performance. And when you have that baseline, it is that much easier to then track and measure over time improvements or even what's negatively impacting you, whether it's, diet or jet lag, or, if someone experienced head trauma and they're going through recovery, even neurodevelopmental conditions or ADHD, effects of brain fog or migraine. So using this device, you can really start to see what's affecting the way that your brain functions. So that's a couple of things that you can use to sort of create that baseline of a holistic view of your brain health. And then there are devices that are looking to tap into your nervous system to affect it in various ways. So a popular research area is transcranial direct current stimulation and transcranial magnetic stimulation as well. So, with both of these, they were originally mostly used to treat mental conditions like depression or PTSD or, where people are suffering on a daily basis. Whereas now we're looking at these devices on how can they optimize our brain function just on an everyday level. So something like Plato work, by Plato Science is the company, but they developed this transcranial direct current stimulation device that I have personally to specifically target cognitive enhancement. So they have 4 different settings to boost your creativity and help generate new ideas. There's a setting for focus, which helps limit distractions. There's a learning setting if you're trying to absorb new information and boost memory of that information. And then there's a problem solving setting. So if you've been working on a problem and you just, you've hit that point where you just can't think of anything else, then putting on a device like this can just help stimulate those areas of the brain to help you come up with a different solution, which I think is very fascinating. And then another TDCS device, which was actually first to market, is Halo Neuroscience.
Yeah.
And they tested it first with elite athletes. And I think, initially these devices were mostly accessed by elite athletes. But why not make it available to the rest of the public, which is, what's happening now that I think is really exciting. But Halo focused their TDCS device on optimizing physical performance. So while wearing that device, you may be practicing a different skill set, whether that's, related, shooting hoops for basketball or a different workout, or even playing the piano is something where, you're using your body and learning a new skill. So their device really targets those areas of the brain that have to do with movement to help you learn those new skills.
Yeah, it's interesting. I tried the Halo headphones, right? It's a headset.
Yeah. How was it?
Like 3 years ago. So I was in San Francisco and I was filming the Smart Drugs documentary that I did, which was more on the side of trying out, smart drugs and nootropics and those kinds of things. But yeah, it was interesting. It was more interesting when they did experiments with me before, and they had me in an elaborate sort of more like a laboratory setting with not with their like commercial headset, but more with something where they could set it, and they got me running through some exercises that they did with astronauts at NASA, and obviously it was about focus and attention and perception, a whole bunch of different things, and it was really, really strong. I've had a lot of friends doing the transcranial direct current stimulation. It also feels that that's pretty scary for a lot of people. I think a lot of the biohacking, it's distinctly unhuman to be picking up these technologies and thinking that we can influence it. But I mean, what you found and people in the biohacking sphere have found is, we're just a platform, and we can tune ourselves like we tune a car.
Exactly.
So that it can last longer, look better, be better, and some of the basics aren't even put into place. I mean, I slip on all of these things in terms of sleep and nutrition and whatever. I try and eat well, I sleep terribly. Exercise is always a challenge. So it's kind of super interesting. When we go into this sort of neurospace, it's sort of exploding in investments and whatever. But I sort of wonder, how much longer can we truly live? So for example, Oksana, say if you followed the research and you followed everything by the book, and let's baseline with what's available today. How do you know if you're living longer?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I don't think anyone has an exact, direct answer right now. Time will tell.
Yeah.
But there is exciting research happening to target various hallmarks of aging and various rejuvenation strategies. I don't think it's going to be just a single pill or a single therapeutic that you will take and live longer. It's going to be a combination of different factors, including lifestyle. But essentially, aging is the accumulation of damage in our bodies. And over time, as we age, our bodies just are not as effective at getting that damage out of our bodies and getting rid of it. And so it accumulates, which then manifests as age-related diseases. And those age-related diseases, they're currently the top causes of death worldwide, things like cancer, respiratory disorders, cardiovascular diseases, things like that. But what they found is that if we just cure one age-related disease, if we, get rid of cardiovascular disease, it may be giving someone an extra 2 years of life, because the reality is aging is still happening at the root cause. And so that person is likely to then develop another age-related disease. So we're really having to get at the root cause and affect those aging pathways to really start to extend people's lifespan and health span in a meaningful way. There are speculations that longevity therapeutics may give someone an extra 30% years of life, but it's all speculative. I mean, I don't know if you've heard about telomeres. There's a lot of research happening in telomeres and reading aging using our telomeres. And again, I wrote an article discussing why I personally am not going to invest in a telomere test to test my biological age, because I don't think they're at their most accurate stage of technology just yet. However, even if we have, if someone has long telomeres, or if we extend them, maybe they'll live until their early hundreds, but there is a limit. And so that's where I think it's not going to be just one thing. We need to attack aging from all different angles. And there are 9 different aging pathways that have been discovered. And so it's going to be a combination of therapeutics.
It's kind of interesting as well. The big question I have is, how does all of this research and how do all these new, applications or drugs or insights, how does that affect sort of the national health systems across different countries like UK, Canada, US, and whatever? Are health practitioners, the more traditional health practitioners, physicians and whatever, are they sort of taking this on board and saying, okay, this is valid. We're going to start asking our patients to do this, and this is going to have a difference.
I mean, we will need to go through a healthcare paradigm shift, I think, to really implement longevity as part of a standard healthcare practice, because, definitely right now our healthcare system is not set up for preventative healthcare.
Right.
It's more so around acute healthcare. Once you are diagnosed, okay, what can we do now to treat your symptoms and give you a better quality of life as you're living with this chronic condition? So there will definitely need to be some kind of shift. And right now, I think we're seeing people kind of advocating for themselves and getting more interested in preventive health. But from the medical system standpoint, there will need to be some significant changes in how it operates.
Yeah, no, again, like back to 3 years ago when I was in San Francisco, I actually sat down with a doctor that was pretty on top of this and supportive of this. Dr.
That's wonderful.
Molly Maloof, you've probably heard of
that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in preparation for this documentary, I did. We spent a couple of $1,000s on different tests. I don't think I'd had so many tests done on me. Anyway, so went ahead, and she was literally looking at things that people even in the testing center are like, why are you getting this done? It's like these things are all very specific, but that sort of holistic view, meeting healthcare, a trained physician that's working with people, and she worked very specifically with people about optimizing their performance and their health, not necessarily around longevity, but definitely around just feeling better. But it's kind of interesting. I think that there's almost this gap. If there's such a lot of opportunity to make people feel better and to live longer, then there's this gap, and the gap right now is around access to the money to be able to do it. So it's almost like the haves and the have-nots. And is biohacking and the ability to maintain this performance and the things that you do and the people in your group do, is it just for people that are actually got the investment available, got the money available to do it? So is it going to be for rich people to be able to use, and the poor are still going to struggle with even the basics of feeding themselves and their families?
Yeah, that's a really important question to talk about, I think, because as I said, there are so many free biohacks that anyone can implement just in terms of lifestyle to start to slow down their aging process, and just live healthier for longer, without necessarily investing in expensive technology. The exciting thing is that there is an increasing number of technology platforms and products available to help us take us to the next level. As you said, there are these sort of more private access type of clinics that are more specialized, that will work with you to run all these various tests and provide recommendations, and it is expensive. But I think, like with any technology innovation and adoption curve, this technology will get cheaper and more accessible down the line. In the beginning, it might be less so, but who's to say that it won't be massively available? I mean, at the end of the day, if there's a demand, then hopefully we'll see the price go down. But yeah, I mean, in terms of what you said of all the different tests, there was exciting research coming out of Stanford in the beginning of last year, where they classified that we age according to 4 distinct agiotypes, as they called them.
Right.
And they used, essentially in the study, they put these participants through so much profiling over the course of 4 years, where they used proteomics, and metabolomics, microbial profiling of their gut, transcriptomics, so all the latest technology to really profile their biomarkers and see what's happening in their bodies in terms of aging. And that was really exciting, the fact that, we now can do something like this. And they found that people are typically aging in 4 pathways, which are immunity pathways, liver dysfunction, kidney dysfunction, or metabolism and inflammation. And the interesting thing is that certain people may only age or show the most aging or progressive aging in only one of the 4 pathways, versus some people may have 2 pathways that they need to focus on, or some people may be experiencing rapid aging across all 4. And I think that's really exciting, looking into the future and how we can apply these learnings, is that we can get that much more personalized with our approaches. If someone knows their agiotype, then it gives them a more directive path to what they really need to focus on in terms of optimizing throughout their life.
It's interesting to me as well, right? Because in our sort of pre-chat before this, I sort of brought up the fact that there's a lot of this which is about good genetics, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously there are certain parts of the world, like Japan, has got incredibly old, it's got an incredibly large aging population, which is actually causing a huge amount of problems with the social security system, because kids aren't having children, right? Mm-hmm. But what was it, the oldest living verified oldest living man was in Japan, and he lived till he was 116 years old, right? And the oldest known living person, right? I guess it's unverified. Is he's 118 years old, and it's kind of crazy, isn't it, to think that these people have got an incredible amount of wisdom, but they're kind of stuck in this body, but like genetically they're like these superhumans, and we're just trying to catch up with our own genetic deformities of the lineages that we have through random selection of like who our parents are and whatever, and this is interesting. So I'm Northern European. I'm assuming your parental lineage is in Eastern Europe. Yes. As well, right? So, and it's very different profile for people in Spain, for people in Asia, people in Africa as well. So I'm sort of wondering on that side of things, how do all these technologies try and play off of the genetic truths that we have sort of as our foundations?
Yeah, so another interesting topic, and I have a background in genetics, so this part really excites me as well.
Let's do it.
Let's dive in.
Yeah, let's dive in.
So the reality is genetics influences about 54% of biological aging. The other half is influenced by environmental factors, lifestyle, and your medical history. Have you been in a bad car accident or, something like that you couldn't really foresee. But genetics isn't everything. And I think that provides that much more hope and encouragement for what we can do. And an area that really excites me is epigenetic research as well. Right. And that's one of the areas of longevity research right now is cellular reprogramming. Right. And what epigenetics is, so there's our DNA, which is our blueprint. And, if you get a genetic test, it'll tell you, what that blueprint is for you. And that remains the same throughout life. But our epigenetics can actually change throughout life. In response to lifestyle, environments, any stressors. And epigenetics are like little tags on your DNA that essentially control which ones of your genes are suppressed or expressed in your body. And it's a great control mechanism because when we're younger and we're growing up as children, we need certain genes to be expressed versus when we're adults, we may not necessarily need those same genes. We may need different genes to be expressed. And so epigenetics really is the control system that alters your gene expression. And these epigenetic changes get accumulated throughout life. They can get passed on to offspring. So they kind of may affect the genetic blueprint of your future children as well. Right. And so looking at epigenetic changes is one of the areas of research and one of the ways to even test your biological age. So a company that does this is DNAge, and I've done their tests to check my epigenetic expression. But the reality is that we can change our epigenetic expression over time with various lifestyle interventions or, just how we're living our life overall, which is very exciting. And, that's one thing, but the epigenetic reprogramming, that the research that's happening there is looking at ways that we can actually turn back the clock using epigenetics. Right. To actually change our epigenetic expression. And that's based on, so they're called Yamanaka factors, and they won the Nobel Prize in 2012 for this research. But essentially there are two main companies that are looking at this, but other clinical research happening as well, where they found 4 genes that can reverse aging in human cells. And now this hasn't been tested in humans, but they tested this in human cells. So hopefully human clinical trial research is the next step. But this is very exciting because imagine, taking a pill or viral vector that will essentially turn back the clock on your epigenetic expression back 20 years or however younger you want to be. So that's a very, very exciting area of research and longevity that is very real, as yeah. as wild as it sounds,
I don't think it sounds wild at all. And the reason I say that it's not wild is that 2.5 years ago, I did something called The Work, and it was run by a woman and called Gila Golub in Vancouver. And there's a huge community of over 100 people that have done this, and you end up being in, a 12 to 16 person circle, and you've got 2 people that look after you through, two weekends of 2.5 days per weekend, going through this basically an epigenetic reprogramming. It's NLP. Wow. It's using different kinds of therapies because we've got these hangovers from generations of trauma. I've seen people in breathwork sessions regress to be their grandmothers in concentration camps in Poland. Wow. And it sounds wild to say this, and people can't wrap their heads around it. But these memories live through our cells. But the work of people like Bruce Lipton and whatever have really looked at how we can change your belief systems, right? Belief systems and perceptions and it can affect you at a cellular level. So you are fitter, you are healthier, you can live longer, you no longer carry that trauma. I mean, it's like a detoxification of trauma, and I've been doing it. I've got a life coach that still uses the methods that we used. I use something called Psych K, All right, and Psych K, just it's a number of techniques so that you can subconsciously change how you react to your environments and whatever. And in stressful times, it can be incredibly useful. I'm a very different person today than I was 2.5 years ago. Not that I was in pieces 2.5 years ago, but there were some fundamental things that changed in my life. And now I've got a great partner and I've got a kid, and there's a whole bunch of those things that manifested off the back of this work because of worthiness and whatever. So that's super. I'm super interested in this, Oksana. This is the stuff that I get into as a sort of an active biohacker these days. But it's
I
interesting.
think that's fascinating what you mentioned on the sort of using psychological reprogramming. So while this research is happening at the clinical level to develop these therapeutics, there are ways you can access this through these workshops that you mentioned. And I would love, please send me some links. Sure. I'd love to look into the program that you went through because it's absolutely fascinating. Is, why wait for these therapeutics? There are things that you can do today, just, accessing your brain and your mindset.
Yeah, I in these sessions, I met stage 4 cancer patients, or people with stage 4 cancer, I should say, that have been living with it for like 7 or 8 years. I can't say that strength of will carries you through, cancer diagnoses and the progression of the disease. But there's something to be said about this strength of belief and will and dealing with, the things that rip us apart from inside subconsciously, because
the stress that we carry that is not dealt with.
We are sensory beings. We are physiological beings. We're sensory beings. We're psychological beings, and all of it, I think, is up for grabs in the scheme of things. I mean, Oksana, I think we need to have 2 or 3 sessions talking about this kind of stuff.
I agree.
Because I mean,
so much to talk about.
You fitted so much in the time that we've had to talk, and what I might do is sort of have a chat to you, and maybe we can co-author some blog posts or something like that to actually start sharing a bit more of this information, because I think it's really very important. And for anyone listening, think about biohacking and think about what that could do with your life. And Oksana, where can people sort of follow you and find out more about what you're actually doing in this side of things?
Yeah, so I share all my longevity findings and tips and personal product reviews on my Instagram, Canadian Biohacker, as well as my YouTube channel. And then if anyone's in Toronto, feel free to join the Biohacking and Longevity TO group. And otherwise, I'm always writing blog posts as well on my Medium channel. So just look up Canadian Biohacker and we'll go from there. And anyone, feel free to reach out. I'm always looking to meet other like-minded people. I mean, it's part of the reason why I started the meetup group in Toronto is I was shocked that something like that didn't exist. And I wanted to connect with other like-minded people, but also raise awareness that, hey, this research it's happening and it's really exciting. And, aging could be solved within our lifetime, which is incredible.
Yeah, and it's interesting because once you start talking about biohacking, people look at you from the side and everyone's like, sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And what are you doing? And even these like rising disciplines of psychedelic therapy, and new ways of working out, new ideas around nutrition and keto and all these things. There's a lot of skepticism because culturally we've been told that there's one way to have the food that you need, and one way that to exercise and whatever. And biohacking literally like shatters all the perceptions and all the advice on the floor and says, okay, these are all valid, but you've got to build them in a way that works for you individually, because we're all very, very different. Anyway, Oksana, I'd like to say thank you so much for your time today. This is fascinating to me, and I need to talk to you about a project that I'm working on right now, because I think I need your help in a couple of areas. Anyway, Oksana Andreiuk, I'd like to say thank you very much. Your work as a biotechnology scientist, a biohacker, and a futurist, of course, is important to the world. And I look forward to keep working and chatting with you as things develop on your side.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thanks for having me on this podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope we can continue the conversation further. Looking forward to some future projects as well.
Cool. Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Nick.